Hello, everyone. This is John Kogan. I'm the CEO of Proformative, the online community for corporate finance, accounting, treasury, and related professionals. I would like to welcome everyone to today's webinar, which is part of our technology webinar series, Cloud-Based Consolidation and Reporting from Host Analytics. This webinar will showcase Host Analytics' cloud-based close and disclose application. It will highlight how pre-built financial and accounting intelligence in the cloud can reduce the time to close and allow for more time for analysis and fact-based decisions. With Host Analytics application, companies can improve internal controls on producing financial statements, consolidate across multiple entities, ERPs, and currencies, manage disclosures seamlessly, as well as budgeting and forecasting processes. And today we'll be hearing from one of Host Analytics solution consultants who will be giving us a tour of the product as well as an overview of the product, including discussions of real-world case studies and examples of how this product is used at some of their client sites. Before we get started, of course, I'd like to thank Host Analytics for sponsoring today's event. And I'd like to welcome everyone formally to Proformative. If this is your first time at a Proformative event, we're the largest and fastest growing online community of corporate finance, accounting, treasury, and related professionals. We have events. We also have a very active website. We appreciate you joining us this morning. A couple notes on this morning's event: a link to today's presentation and a recording of this webinar will be sent out to all attendees within 24 hours of the event. Now, this presentation is already posted at performative.com/resources. You can go there and download it now for free, of course, like everything on Performative. But realize that much of today's content is actually a live demo. So there are a few slides that give an overview of the platform before we get into the demo. That's what we have posted up on performative.com. But within 24 hours, we should have this entire webinar posted that will include the review of the slides as well as the live demo that we'll go through. Quick reminder, there is no CPE for today's webinar. This is a product demo, not one of our other sort of typical educational webinars, so there will be no polling questions as well, and we'll be able to focus on the platform itself. Please do ask questions. We've got Rob Fresconi, who I'll introduce shortly, on the line. He'll be walking us through the slides as well as the demo. He is, of course, very deep in this platform, and he helps apply it at a number of customers of varying sizes and industries. If you have questions about the Host Analytics platform, this is the perfect time to get them out, and he's a perfect person to ask. So feel free to ask questions at any point today. You'll see actually there's a little questions section of your GoToWebinar control panel. You might have to expand it by hitting the plus, but go ahead and hit us with questions at any time. Finally, just after we finish the webinar proper today, you will be asked to take a short survey regarding today's webinar. Also, if you'd like to be connected with Rob for any follow-up questions, we make that very easy. So click the mouse during that post-event survey. The survey takes all of 60 seconds. We always want to know how we're doing and figure out how to do things better. So if you give us that extra minute, we greatly appreciate it. And without further ado, let's go ahead and get into the main events. And starting us off today is Rob Fresconi, who's a solution consultant at Host Analytics. Rob brings to Host Analytics over 14 years of experience in business software, primarily in the enterprise resource planning space. Rob comes to Host Analytics from Lawson Software, where he was a solution consultant in Lawson's public sector group. During his career, Rob has served in a variety of finance roles and is also an expert in software revenue recognition. Rob began his career in public accounting and is a CPA. He also holds an MBA in finance. Rob, thanks so much for joining us today, and please take it away.
Thank you, John. Good to be here. I appreciate it. Thanks, everyone, for joining us today. Well, before we get into the actual demonstration of the software, I just want to kind of give an overview of what we're going to be talking about today before we get to that point. And, of course, we'll use PowerPoint as that way to do that. So what I want to do is just go through a couple of high-level concepts around what we provide here at Host Analytics for our customers and why corporate performance management, and specifically why budgeting and planning and consolidation solutions are so important. So if you think about companies that are using outdated manual systems. And the biggest example of this is Excel by far. What happens is when you use these old systems, the process is is fraught with inefficiencies. It takes way too much time, and there's frequent and recurring errors, and some of these errors you don't even know exist in your process throughout all of those spreadsheets. And this can lead to sometimes expensive compliance issues. So when it comes down to it, the most common consequence from a lack of modern technology is that executives and managers in the organization are suffering from making poor decisions, and they're making poor decisions because they lack the actual facts, financial facts, in order to really understand what's the full spectrum of risk and reward from some of those decisions that they're making, sometimes on a daily basis. So they're really lacking the insight into the company's performance. What are those results? You're looking into the rear, and looking forward, of course. And I think how we see this play out is we see budgets not being hit and forecasts that are really all over the board. So one of the issues that's driving this is just the difficulty in closing the books, within what we call that decision window. There's only a certain amount of days that you have to go through that process of closing the books to free up enough time to really do the proper analysis that the business really needs. And within many organizations, this process is, the close and disclose process, closing of the books is very inefficient, and it's very difficult. It's fraught with inefficiencies. And some of the things that cause that are lack of workflow, lack of control processes, inadequate financial reporting tools, and poor variance analysis from those inadequate tools. And this can result in really a risky disclosure process. So Deloitte CFO signals, Deloitte did a study, called their CFO signals, in the first quarter of 2012. And I won't read the slide here. You can see some of the things that they found out. But one of the biggest challenges that finance faces is being able to provide metrics, information, and really more importantly, the technology and tools needed to make the sound business decisions that executives need and managers need to make on a daily basis. And what they found was that this whole area was one of the biggest areas of concerns for CFOs who responded to that survey. So what does Host Analytics do to really help you solve this problem that you have? So the first thing we can do with budgeting and planning and consolidation is to help organize the data and process that data better to help make those decisions more calmly, more accurate, more based on real financial facts. So we're going to be going through a lot of information about the close process, the disclose process. We'll talk about the various roles and the various activities throughout that particular process. And what you can see is that it's a very complex process, and even within finance, there's going to be a lot of people involved. And they're basically illustrated here on this particular slide. So we will definitely cover that. Let's switch over and just talk about the cloud a little bit in response to or in relation to Host Analytics. So we deliver our solution, our budgeting, planning, and close and disclose solution over the cloud. So why does that matter? And how does that all fit with what we're talking about today? So cloud technology offers many advantages over the more traditional software, typically installed on-premise. So if you think of it as the old manufacturing factories, having a power-producing plant on site and moving together all their electricity and gas off on a grid, it's a pretty similar concept. So you go from a utility-based approach, using to a utility-based approach, using a subscription-based model, essentially. So what does that mean to you? Well, it means that your total cost of ownership, which is really what matters, and to do that comparison, we can help you go through that process, but that's really the thing you need to be focused on. What's that total cost over a time horizon when you factor in all the factors, not just the software and the maintenance, versus on-premise, but what about, all the hardware, the time to provision that hardware, and the personnel required to run all that hardware, administer all the software, et cetera. It's really based on TCO. So total cost of ownership and the time to value is decreased. You begin to see value from your investments much, much quicker. So instead of having to pay for all those upgrades to get the system, upgraded to the latest and greatest version, and the time it takes to do that, and get all the hardware provisioned and in place and what have you, all the innovation, all those best practices, all those updates are going to be included in your subscription fee in a cloud model. So what Host Analytics does is help companies put in place global standards and best practices in business decisions, so that customers can easily make quick decisions on initiatives like, should we cut costs? Should we invest in a new plant? Should we hire those sales reps that we've been thinking about hiring based on where we thought our plan was for revenue, for sales? And what it can do is they make these go and no-go decisions. They can make these decisions based on financial facts, and that's really where we come in. And that's pretty much our view of the world when it comes to corporate performance management software, especially in the close and disclose space. So Host Analytics has broad capabilities across consolidation, close and disclose, reporting, and it's been built up over a 12-year life of the company. And we are actually the only financial consolidations and reporting suite in the cloud right now, able to handle the close and disclose requirements required of Fortune 500 companies. So if you have a centralized or decentralized process, it's really up to you. We can certainly accommodate that. Help you automate those processes within close and disclose, improve accountability and control, and help you with disclosure management as well. This is one thing I remembered a lot from my days in finance, and I'll talk about that later, but just the time involved to take data from your ERP system, get it into an Excel format, mirror that up with a Word document. Believe it or not, this was our process, and we were a public company, and then go through the iterations when you had post-close entries and changes that you had to make. It was very time-consuming, very error-prone, and did not put us in a good position where we were in that decision window. We were closing the books quickly, disclosing quickly, and then doing analysis and really helping the business run the business, which is what I thought was really my primary job. So we'll talk about that as well, and that can cover the basis from public companies, and we have, I think, about something like a third of our customers are public companies, as well as private. So all companies report regardless of size and regardless of whether or not they're public or private. So if it's financial statements for investors, financial statements for banks, if it's a budget book, forecast book, any kind of consolidated reporting that you need to do, where you're taking all different types of financial reports or graphs or KPIs, mirroring them up with some narratives and producing a final document, we can certainly help with that, and we'll talk about that during this the software demonstration. Just a quick snapshot of some of our customers. I'll read them out. You can definitely see them, and we cover the gamut when it comes to industries, from CPG to technology, manufacturing, financial services, and healthcare. So, what I was thinking about before, we see this really in every role in the organization across our customer base. So it's not just in finance. So with all the data, both the external data and the internal data, financial data and operational data, they need to see it need to be able to have it on any device and be able to access all this data in order to be able to make decisions. So John gave a background of what my experience has been. I've spent most of my life in finance and accounting. I mean, really, I like to tell people it's been probably 95% of my career in finance and accounting, and only a few years so far in pre-sales. So I've sat in your shoes, done very similar or maybe identical type work that you all are doing, out in the audience. And when you think about that, the typical close and disclose process, I hope people are laughing a little bit. This is my son, number one, and it's hard to interact because I don't hear anyone laughing or saying anything. So number one, this is not my son. Number two, I don't think it's actually a little boy holding up a big boulder. I think he's just standing there, and that's what it's supposed to look like. But in Greek mythology, there's a character called Sisyphus, and Sisyphus was a Greek god or a Greek king who was sentenced to rolling this large boulder up a hill, and then only to see it roll all the way back down at the right after he let it go, and he had to do this perpetually. And sometimes we think about the planning process, the close and disclose process, in that kind of realm. It never seems like it ends. It never really seems like it gets any easier. So from there, I will actually jump into the software. So right now, hopefully not too much of a delay. You're looking at really what is my home page, and it's just a dashboard. So I'm going to give you kind of a quick tour of we'll start off from a reporting point of view, give you a quick tour, and jump into a consolidations point of view, and jump around a little bit between consolidations and reporting. reporting to give you a good feel of what that process can look like. So we're starting my home page. It's just a dashboard. And I can render up to different types of users based on what their needs are, different types of things. So if we start from the upper left, I've got a KPI that I'm tracking on my dashboard for operating expenses. I'm using certain dimensions like date dimensions. You see down here in the little legend, actual, budget, forecast, prior, actual. These are all my scenarios that I'm bringing in. So I've got 4 different scenarios. I've got time dimension for 12 different months. Tracking by expense amounts. It's in my graph right here, and I can take action on that. And I'll show you some of the things that we can do. I could also bring into a simple graph something as innocuous as consumer confidence index. So this all looks like a bunch of data points on this graph, but behind the scenes through our Decision Hub tool, we're actually bringing in this data from one of our providers automatically. So we've got some built-in integration that is essentially mirroring up these data points to a statistical account that we can render in a graph. If I move down the dashboard a little bit, I'm tracking revenue by FTE. Again, we're back to a KPI. Just want to make sure I have a good handle on what kind of revenue by FTE should I be tracking, not only to actual to plan, but also to my benchmark companies as well. And then we've got a simple revenue by product graph here down in the lower right-hand corner. So what are some of the things that we can do here with what we're looking at? So if we think about operating expenses as a KPI, what do I want to track? I want to be able to track to plan. So I can set thresholds for my operating expense limit to ensure that I don't get too close to actual. So in this particular case, we see some stop lighting, and I'm setting that up to make sure that once I hit 90% of plan, that I'm getting some indications so that I can take some action. So what are some things that I can do here? So I can interact with this right here in the dashboard if I want to. I can do something simple as I may have some users who aren't a big fan of graphs. I want to give them the ability to change from a graphical view into a tabular view. Well, maybe they are a graph freak, but they don't like the one that I've delivered to them. So as you see, as I go across the right here, I'm just changing graph types. So we can do those types of things. They can email a particular KPI to any other user in the organization to take some action. We can drill down, and I'll just click on this for a minute, drill down into other reports. So here, these are just reports that are sitting in our file cabinet, and we'll talk about this when we get to the core of the reporting part of the demonstration. This could be a whole list. This can be any report you want. In this case, we've got about 4 different reports. I'm going to open up the plan validation report. And from this perspective, if I'm really focused on either maybe the planning process or I'm focused on the close and disclose process, maybe I'm bringing this up to understand, are there some areas of concern for the close process? Do we have some items that are misclassified? Maybe I want to see some quick variance analysis. The key is I can render this report in a KPI and really kind of tailor that to those reports that are pulling up relevant information for my end users to help them make decisions, because we're really, we're always pressing for that. So start out high in the dashboard, let them drill down, your users drill down, and give them some tools to do that. So I can drill into a particular report. I can actually drill into another view right within the KPI itself and, see some of the differences between, variance and actuals and budgets and variance and forecasts, right within the application without going to a report. So why don't we just open this thing up, expand it a little bit, and we'll kind of finish out that conversation. So just a different view that we saw before, larger graph. Again, same options that I have. I can go into those drill down reports. I can drill down right here if I want to see, by segment how I'm doing. I can let my user change the date ranges. And I can also add some commentary. I can put in some attachments, some notes. I can tie this into larger and broader initiatives or what ifs. Let's say you're tracking a KPI that's related to opening up a new plant or a new product line or something like that. So a lot of information that you can give to users really at their fingertips. With really the end goal in mind is to help them make decisions quickly without having to have you run 100 different reports or review 100 different reports every single day. Let them focus on the things that matter most. So that's kind of a broad overview of our scorecard application. Let's switch gears a little bit, and I am going to go on to into Microsoft Word. And the reason that I'm doing this is that I want you to kind of begin with the end in mind. So the thing that we're going to talk about at the end of the presentation today, probably be the last thing that we talk about, is our product called Executive Report Manager. So as I scroll through this Word document, and I am in a standalone version of Microsoft Word, we're looking at our 10Q, right? And it looks familiar, to those people who are familiar with public company reporting. This really is a 10Q document. Well, the key here, and the reason that I'm showing this to you, is that this document was actually created within Host Analytics, using our integration with Microsoft Word. So we're able to help you manage, that whole process, that collaborative process of, putting together, those 10Qs, 10Ks for public companies, for private companies, any investor reporting, bank reporting you're doing, maybe budget book, plan books, things like that, with all the objects and data that's stored in Host Analytics, along with other documents, Excel documents, Word documents that you may have outside of Host. And so you can manage a collaborative process, keep people accountable, and engage in that process, and then be able to produce a nice output report to kind of end that that close and disclose cycle, be it to your investors, to the SEC, whatever it is, really with all one click of a button. So we'll show you how to do that, towards the later end of the demo. So if you think about this really being the end game, how do you get there? How do you get there in an efficient, audible, reliable, and repeatable fashion? How can we reduce risk and have confidence in our numbers, our reports, in our processes? Well, in order to do that, what do you really need? You need a process. So this is really what the process is, and this is basically our agenda for the rest of about the 25 minutes or 20 minutes or so that we'll be talking today before the Q&A session. This will serve as that agenda. So it follows a pretty logical format. First you need to load data, right? I mean, the data's got to come from somewhere. The primary driver in our experience for our consolidation solution is you got some sort of business, small, medium, large business that either A, already has a bunch of different entities on different ERP systems, or is in that process because they're acquiring a lot of different businesses, or just knows that they're going to be acquiring a lot of different businesses, and they either don't have a plan to get them all in the same ERP system. They will never get them on the same ERP system, whatever it is, but they've got that need from disparate ERP systems to bring in that data and consolidate that data, perform all their entries so they can actually report that consolidated level. So the first part of that, is to load that data. Then we're just going to be, performing some journal entries. If you had a very robust ERP application and you had all of your data in there and all your entities, a lot of this could be done in that particular application. So we've got separate processes for standard journal entries, recurring journal entries, our dynamic, which we'll talk about, reclasses, for balance sheet reclasses, things like that. It really runs the gamut through eliminations. We'll show you how you can validate some of the data with some of the rules within Host Analytics that you can create, and then go and actually consolidate that data. So let's go ahead and get back into that process. So I'm just going to go click on our Consolidation tab. And this is going to bring us, into the main, part of our, into our consolidation view. This is really the interface for consolidation. It doesn't change. We can do everything essentially, in one screen. So let's give you kind of a quick tour, and then we'll do a little bit of housekeeping, and then really start that process. So I'm going to go where I know we've got some data. The last point we are at, in our demo system is October 2012. We haven't actually finished that particular process. So what am I seeing here? So I'm seeing our different scenarios, right? So for consolidation, we're working in the actual scenario. I've got my time period. Where am I at in the actual entity structure? Here I'm at the highest level, but I don't have to be at the highest level. I can just drill down, and based on security, of course, if you have a centralized process or a decentralized process, you get to determine that. You can determine which companies, which entities that users have access to on a user-by-user basis. So it's not by group or some other mechanism. It is by user. We just, for right now, we're going to live at that highest consolidated level. And what are our processes? Again, our journal entry types: standard, recurring, dynamic. Dynamic is just having the ability to actually have some calculations put into that particular journal entry, and we'll touch on that in a second, so that you don't have to do it outside the system and calculate some of those values. Non-controlling interest, if that's an issue for you, we can certainly accommodate that. Reclassifications, which we talked about before. The biggie, of course, eliminations, and we'll spend a little bit more time on that versus the other areas. Then some of the rules that you can set up. Is my balance sheet balanced? Is my trial balance balanced? What's my top line revenue look like? Is it greater than X? You have the ability to put these formulas in to trigger these validations, just to get you to that point where you've done some of that due diligence to know that you're ready to actually perform that consolidation process. And then the process itself. So this is the consolidation tool, but what about how everything is going to roll up? What about that stuff behind the scenes? So just for a second, we're going to actually look at what we call our segment hierarchy. So in the maintenance tab, in our segment hierarchies, it's really just a fancy word for we're digging into the database. This is just a end user visual representation of what sits in the database. And what I mean by that is you go across the top here, you're seeing all the different dimensions, company, department, account. For our demo system, we have product. This could be customer, project. And some of our system-defined things that you need. You have to know what the time is. You've got to be able to differentiate between scenarios. So I just wanted to give you a view of how you build this out in relation to the consolidation process, and what essentially does it look like. Well, I mean, this is really it. So it's end user defined, focused on finance. IT is not required to do some of these things. This just happens to be my hierarchical structure in my system right now for the company segment, the company dimension. I can use this little checkbox here, rearrange these companies to the different levels very easily, just essentially doing dragging and dropping. Go over to the right here, these are just my attributes essentially for this particular company that we're looking at, the 2010 Decision Works golf course. So what kind of decisions am I making here? Well, I'm telling you, where is it in the roll-up? What's that next highest level? How am I going to roll that data up? In this case, we're going to add it all together. That may not be the case. Maybe subtracting. There could be a calculation in there if we want to. Is it going to be eliminated? What about foreign currency? If you're operating in a multi-currency environment, we certainly can handle that. We've done some very complex things and sophisticated things for our customers in that realm. We have a lot of customers who either are doing business outside the U.S. or are based outside the U.S. So you're setting up, what is your default currency code? Do you have a process that requires interim currencies, based on where you are, in the U.S. and how your consolidation process looks like? And, what about tax reporting? It may be, statutory reporting for, certain countries in Europe. Do you need a different roll-up in order to do that, and how do you accomplish that? So we've got some, we've got some good ways for you to be able to do that. And, this is very similar as we go across dimensions. Open up the account dimension. What am I going to see? Going to see, how did I arrange all of my roll-ups for my different financials, my income statement, my balance sheet, my cash flow. These are just the natural roll-ups, how you want to interact with them, how you want to work with them, and how you want that to designate your planning and consolidation and reporting process. And on that realm, reporting. We talked about multi-currency. I'm just going to open up our consolidated currency view here. These are all system-defined standard leaf-level dimensions in the system. And it's what this is doing behind the scenes is capturing all those different currency effects in the exchange rate differences and the calculations, et cetera. So we're actually capturing that in a predefined reporting dimension so that we can do all those different things that we need to do. So we can look at data in local currency and common currency. We can do analysis around, okay, what would my variances be if I can isolate my foreign exchange rate? So we're using really that dimension for that. But let's get back to the heart of our consolidation and start walking through some of those processes. So the first thing we want to do is let's see, where we're at. Do we have something that kind of proves out where we are at in that process? Well, we do. We've got some reports here, and you probably saw this before. We've got some standard reports here that you can access right in the lower right-hand part of the screen. So let's look at our consolidation status. So I'm just going to run this at the highest level for October of 2012. And what am I seeing? Well, I'm seeing some red exclamation points, and that can't be good, right? That's got to mean there's something wrong or there's some action that's required on my end. So in this particular case, and we can just drill down here too, at the highest, for company 1000, I've got a consolidation process that needs to be run. For company 2200, looks like I'm good. The consolidation is successful. For 3000, it's successful. What about some data loads? I still have some data to load for 1,000. I've got some journal entries that have been started but not posted. So we've got some work to do, but this is a good starting point. So I can always, no matter where I am in that process, I can run this status report to really give me a picture of, where am I in that process, what needs to be done, so I can take some action. So we'll come back to that too after we run that consolidation process. So going back to, if you visualize what our agenda was, that first thing on the list was, loading data. So how do we load data? Well, we load data in a couple of different ways. So the first thing I'm going to do here is we're going to talk about, loading data via a template-based approach. So if I just drill down into the hierarchy here, and I'm going to select, let's select 2100 for US. Click OK. If you're looking really closely, you'll know that these changed a little bit, and I got this actual data load process that was added to my list. And the reason for that is that this is designed so that in your central office, in your core FP&A group, in your core corporate reporting group, you can design templates. In this case, we designed a balance sheet template. So I can keep the data load process as easy as I want it to be. So if you've got small subsidiaries, in the middle of nowhere in Eastern Europe or something like that, they submit you a spreadsheet every month for that, for their process out of whatever their ERP system is. You may not even know what it is. It may be that archaic. This gives you the ability, to allow them to either, interact with it like a spreadsheet. God forbid they're actually just, typing in numbers like that, but you could put formulas in here. They could copy and paste from the file that they get from their system. So very basic, but pretty powerful, because you can push out that responsibility for loading data, for your entities that could be all over the world, where they should be, to where those individuals who know the data best reside, out in the field. So one way to bring in data. And again, these templates you get to create. So we have 2 templates in our demo system, We have balance sheet and tax rate load. We could have many more. There could be operating expenses. There could be revenue. You could have them all in one. It's really up to you. The second thing, and I'm going to go into our maintenance screen to show this, is through a data load rule. So I'm going to select our data load rule for GL data for company 2200 and just kind of give you a brief overview. We don't have enough time to actually run this. But what we're doing here with the data load rule is we're setting up a repeatable process. We're just defining some basic settings for that particular rule. We're able to actually manipulate the input file, and you could do copy and paste here. You could do a file load from any kind of flat file, text file, CSV, Excel, whatever you want to be. I can do some things. I can actually join some data together. So if for some reason you've got an ERP system that's going to dimensionally combine 2 segments into one, you just split it out. I could split those data members of data. I could join those members of data. May or may not be the case. I can manipulate the overall load before it comes into the system. I can define, what those mappings are. So we've got a source column in our flat file to a source column in our system itself. And then I'm loading the data. I mean, it really is that easy. There's a little bit of setup. You're defining what your mappings are. I'm browsing out to get my current file. I'm hitting finish. I'm going through that actual load process. The last thing on that spectrum, in terms of integrating that data, is depending on how sophisticated your process is, we can certainly handle your ETL process or work with you to create one. So if you want a very sophisticated push button approach and you're refreshing that data on a daily basis or something like that, we could go to that level as well. So if you think of it across the continuum, it could be as simple as collecting data through the data load templates that we showed before, the actual data load. And that could be copying, pasting. It could be hand-keying information if you want it to be. We can use the data load rule, which is repeatable, flat file upload wizard, or an ETL process, something a little more sophisticated. So that's essentially the process to get data in the system to start actually consolidating. So let's run through some of these different journal entries so we can have some time to look at reporting. So I'm not going to cover every single one because most of these look pretty similar. And number one, and number two, I really don't want to bore you to death. So standard journal entry is a standard journal entry. If you're used to an ERP system, you're gonna be able to use this very, very easily. There's really no trick to it. It's probably actually easier. It's easier than the ERP systems that I've used in the past. So standard journal entry to correct prepaid insurance. This can happen in your ERP system. If you're crossing entities that are on different ERP systems, you can do it in Host Analytics. Recurring journal entries, same thing. You've got some kind of entry for some amortization of prepaid or something of that nature. In this case, a bonus accrual that's happening every single month that you don't want to have to key in every single month. You set it up. You define the start and end dates. It's good to go. It's going to be there to post every single month when you get to that point. Dynamic journals. I'll open up a little bit, for display purposes here. We've got a few different dynamic journals. So what would you use these for? The best example I like to bring up is, what about those royalties? Royalties you're going to pay based on revenue or some other metric every single month, but it is based on a calculation. So I can actually, in this case, we live in a kind of a golf club and golf ball retailer distributor world in our demo environment. So we're selling golf clubs. We're selling golf balls. I can set a rule that will calculate what my royalty is based on X percentage of top line revenue for not just the royalties that are related to the finance department, but dimensionally as well. So what are those royalties going to be down to the product level, and if I wanted to, project level or other dimensions, and that's just based on how you run your business, how you want to slice and dice the data. Those are essentially what dynamic journals are. So just think I can create some logic, create some calculations that will also recur as well. So again, focusing on speeding up this process, taking some of the manual work out so you can close in that decision window to help make decisions much faster to help run that business. Partial ownership rules. If non-controlling interest is an issue to you, we certainly have you covered there. Reclassifications. The classic here are balance sheet reclassifications. Let's focus on eliminations because I think this is where we want to spend some time. So let's talk about intercompany. Let's talk about our due to and due from very quickly. And this is where we can really do, I think, a lot of heavy lifting for those of you in the audience, and this is what we've done really with our customers. So I'm setting what my out of balance is. What's my plug? I'm going in and determining what are my eliminating accounts. What's my due to? What's my due from? I'm actually exposing that chart of accounts that resides in the system, to make some of these setup considerations. I can also determine what the threshold is here. So I just go double-click here. I can change that number to 2,000, whatever number I want it to be, and that's going to be important because once we get past this and we actually start doing some analysis and looking at some of our data, that's going to come into play. So I can go into our variance report, select those same two accounts that we were working with, and I can get a pretty good view of where we're on and where we're off. So I can tell, from looking at the green, I know that 0 obviously is within my tolerance, right? So my relationship between 2100 and my other trading partner, we're good to go. We don't have any reconciling items that we have to deal with. When we move over to 2120 and 2200, we've got some issues. So I can double-click from there, have that detail I need, pulling from our common chart of accounts, and I can know this is where we're off. We've got an imbalance here of 26,146, a variance there. I've got to start looking. So very quickly I can run this variance analysis report, at least give me a starting point of what companies are in balance and what companies are not in balance, so we can really improve our close process from that side. And validations. We talked about validations a little bit before. These are just calculations. Is my balance sheet balanced? Is my trial balance balanced? You can set other rules as well as you need. So let's assume that we've gone through, I realize this is very, very quick, but we've gone through our actual consolidation process. We're ready to go. So I'm going to go down to Consolidate. It's going to give me a history of all the different times I've consolidated. And I'm going to say process. Let's get this thing going. So this is going to take about a minute to a minute and a half, which is fine. We've got some other things to talk about. I've actually got a little notification here. Consolidation process has been submitted for processing. So that's going to just sit in my log until it's ready. So let's talk about a few other things. So number one, within Host Analytics, you run a consolidation why other users are logged into the system. Some old versions of other vendor software did not work that way. That's something that we can definitely do. Number two, you can run the consolidation process anytime for multiple times And again, the other users can be logged in the system, while you do that. So from a customer perspective, just jump forward. Oh, sorry about that. This is a slide I wanted to get to just share with you, some success that we've seen in our customer base, using this tool. You can read some of this. Groupon we've done a lot of work with. They started out with a very good close process. In my view, 3 days is great. They shaved 2 days off that process. And that was during a year in their existence where they added something like 50 different entities, worldwide, because they were going on such a large acquisition spree. Style Site, a customer of ours out east that manages, I think it's a fashion website, took their close process from 20 to 10. I'm not going to read all of these for you, but the proof really is in the pudding. If you're going to invest in something like this, what's the outcome going to be? We've seen some real value in our customer base, in that regard, being able to slice a decent amount of time off of their close processes. And we've done it internally too, because we use the consolidation tool internally at Host Analytics to run our process. Let's go back into the software here. Okay, it has been completed successfully. I've got my little notification here. Let's prove that out. All I'm going to do is just go back into our status report, click go, and I expect to see consolidation to be completed. And it is. We see all the check marks. We know we're good to go. We know the process worked. So we are done with the consolidation process. So let's switch over to reporting. I want to make sure we can at least cover enough of this before our Q&A session. So we've finished the consolidation process, loaded up all the data, did all of our eliminating journal entries and other entries we needed to make. So we're done there. But we want to do some reporting. So you've seen a couple of examples of reports already, within scorecards, reports that we can attach to scorecards. This is really just a view of our file cabinet. And the file cabinet is just a way that we let you organize your reports. So all these folders are user-defined. You can assign them on a user basis. Within finance, since you're going to be on the application, you can assign the reports, security for reports on a user-by-user basis. This is where you're going to go. So if you think about the hard parts about reporting, part of it sometimes is just getting those reports out to end users. So we really encourage a self-service approach where end users can log into the system, go to folders and reports that they are assigned to, and run those reports and get the answers they need all by themselves. So what I've done here is just gone into my favorites folder here. Let's look at a couple of different reports, and I promise you we'll talk about that Executive Report Manager report, that 10Q, to kind of round out this discussion. So let's look at a couple that we have. This could be a whole list of reports. This could be the 7 that I have. I just saved them as my favorites because these are ones that I want to use on a pretty regular basis. So one common thing I need to be able to do, based on my past experience in a multi-currency environment, is really isolate those FX differences, right? So I'm bringing in my actual data. It's just a income statement. We'll talk about row sets in a little bit here, how we organize and how we set up, this particular part of the report. I'm bringing in my actual data, common currency and local currency. I got my budget data. These are just scenarios, by the way, so I'm just selecting, which scenarios I want in the report. And then I'm doing something very powerful here. I'm able to say, hey, I want to look at those variances, but I want to hold that currency rate the same. I want to account for all those different fluctuations in currency rates to know, where in my operations do I really have any issues? Where are things going well? Where are things going poorly? So I'm just using some, math behind the scenes, creating a separate scenario and plugging that scenario, dropping that into a report to really isolate that. So I've got my actual income statement, I've got my 2012 budget, and now I've got my 2012 actuals, at that budget rate. So that's one example. We have more example of a financial statement report itself. So let's think about ad hoc reporting. If you need to get quick answers, out to people. Let's look at, gross margin by product. So the great example of an ad hoc report. So I'm going to show you a couple things that you can do here. So, very basic reports. Got our little logo there. Not a lot of formatting. You don't want to mess around too much. You want to get to that data so you can make some decisions. So I've got revenue by product here, by company, and I can change those dimensions around. I'm just going to drill down. So we talked about those segment hierarchies before. This is just based on the hierarchies that you set. So as simple or as sophisticated, in this case, as your product hierarchy may be, we can reproduce that in our multi-dimensional cube so that your users can drill down into each succeeding level to get to where they want to go. So I want to take a look at my driver's revenue in actuals for 2012. I'm seeing my number there. I know what it is. I can also double-click here and bring over the actual transactions that support that number. So, good to know, great information, all residing within Host Analytics, again, so you get end users information they need to make decisions. But what if I want to make some changes? So I'm just going to expose, our building blocks of this particular report and just, change a couple of things around. So let's do something very simple. I like actuals, but you know what? It'd be great to have actuals and budget too. So let's just make that quick change. I'm going to go into my scenario dimension, double-click. This is my whole list of scenarios that I have access to based on security. I'm going to go in and select my budget. Now I could move this up if I wanted to be left of actual. We'll just leave it at right. I'm going to click OK, click Run. It's going to rerun the report. Now I have something a little more powerful. I have actuals to budget. I could also go in and insert some formulas. And we don't necessarily have enough time to do that today, but I'm just going to go through some of the things that we can do. So these are just predefined formulas. I could put in a variance, compare those columns. It can be in percentages. I can use this for comments, for back and forth, for variance analysis. Or I could put in a custom formula as well. So pretty powerful, designed for end users, designed for finance users to be able to create reports quickly and to get information that you need to make decisions. But what about that thing we looked at a long, long time ago, it seems, 40 minutes ago, that Microsoft Word-looking report? Well, here it is right now. So here's the output of that report that I'm going to show you. So in this case, it's 10Q. It's the balance sheet view that we're looking at right now on this particular page. We're opening it up in Microsoft Word. Well, how did we actually get to that point? So let's go take a look at that. All I'm going to do is go into my 10Q report. So this is Executive Report Manager. So to give you kind of a lay of the land here, what is Executive Report Manager? What does it do? And how do we interact with it? So I think I've talked enough at this point about what it does. So what is the setup to get me that nice looking report that we just saw before? So we've got 3 different panes, very similar to our budgeting planning tool if you've seen that before. And all we're doing in our report pane is we're saying, these are the different sections. So here's my report. I'm going to add information like, let's assign a due date. Let's tie that due date into our workflow so we know what the status is. We can hold some people accountable. And speaking of, holding people accountable, who are those owners? I can expose all my different users in the application so I can assign them to different sections of the reports because we know it's going to be a collaborative process. Certain individuals will have responsibility for certain of these sections, and you can control their access by security, both to the reports that are sitting in the file cabinet and to the sections in this particular Executive Report Manager report as well. So we've got our due dates, we've assigned our users. What kind of document are we going to be looking at? We're selecting our document types. In this type, it's going to be a Word output. And so what about these other sections here? So I've got my Part 1. This is going to align with our 10Q, per the SEC's rules and how it should look. I've got all my different objects, if you will, that roll up into Part 1. So I've got my consolidated balance sheet. That's what we were looking at before. This is just a financial report within Host Analytics that has been exported into a Word document. I've got a financial report straight from Host Analytics in its native format. So this happens to be a financial report. If I pull this down, I can see all the different things that I can pull in this report. It can be an ad hoc report. It can be a report that we just looked at. It could be this particular financial report, anything from the scorecard or dashboard. It could also be some text here as well if I want. This happens to be a financial report. I click on this button, what am I seeing? I'm actually seeing that file cabinet over here that we just talked about. So I just exposed all those contents in there. I'm selecting that one report, and this is really where I think the power comes in when I click on this Properties tab. So if you think about any report that you're doing, think about where you're going to create it, how you're going to maintain it, and how much work that's going to be. for this consolidated income statement, if I had this report in multiple different sections, throughout this whole structure right here, I'm not going to have to create that report, several different times and then store those versions up here in my file cabinet. I'm going to use just one version of that report. But dimensionally, I'm going to be able to make some decisions on a section-by-section basis. So this same consolidated income statement report that there's only one of that sits in this file cabinet for Part 1 financial information, it's going to pull data based on this dimensional combination. Decision works for company, the highest level for department, all the products, etc. As I move down into other sections of the report, I can change those properties dimensionally to pull different data from that multidimensional cube based on what I want to see. So one version, one report, several versions, pointing directly in that multidimensional database, which is easy to do. I've used that term a lot, but we're just talking about exposing boxes and making check marks. And users can do it. I can use it. I'm not a technical person. So it really gives you some power in that process. So allows you to collaborate, allows you to track status of the report preparation process. You can use those assets that are in the host analytics repository for reporting. Again, reports, dashboards, KPIs, etc. Other text-type documents, Word documents, Excel documents, image files. So you can use this as a single source of truth. Use all the data that you're going to put into it to help manage your close and disclose process, and end up with that outcome of a fully formatted financial report, in this case for the SEC. And with that, I'm going to turn it back over to John for our Q&A session.
Great, thanks so much, Rob. I'm going to go ahead and pull things back to my desktop here. Bear with me for one moment, folks. Okay, just got through the demo. I'll hop into Q&A. First question up, Rob. You showed document types of Word and PowerPoint. What about XBRL?
So, certainly from an ERM perspective, we're going to be able to handle outputting into Word, outputting into PowerPoint, but we also have an XBRL engine, and we have some customers, specifically those SEC reporting customers who are using that functionality.
Okay, great. In terms of pulling data in from ERP systems, is the host analytics platform, does it come with pre-built connectors, for certain larger systems, Oracle, SAP, et cetera? Does it have to be custom done? How do companies accommodate pulling data into your system?
Well, we talked about this a little bit earlier on, but just to kind of reiterate what I said, we really look at this over a spectrum and start from the most simplest. And just bear in mind, simple does not have to mean very small companies, because we have small companies and we have medium and large companies who will use a simple approach to bring in data. It's really about how often do you need that data to update, and that's the financial data, the operational data, and then how often is what we call like the metadata changing, your departments, your accounts, your sub-accounts, your companies that's coming from your ERP system. So if we think about a spectrum from pretty darn easy and repeatable and included in the base solution to a little more sophisticated, it goes from data load rules, which we talked about already, and that's just that wizard-based approach to bring data in. From a consolidation and reporting point of view, we'll add on to that those actual data load templates, and that's really for those those finance managers or controllers who are in disparate parts of the country or the world. You allow them to copy and paste data in, or actually enter in data into that template for their particular company that they're responsible for to begin that consolidation process. And the third piece is, as I said before, it's if you've got an ETL process, if you're using like a cast iron or some other tool like that, we can certainly work with you to design a more polished push button approach, to data integration. So it really runs the gamut. But again, it's going to be based on our discussions with you and really understanding what's important to you and what you really want.
Mm-hmm. Does host analytics tend to work directly with customers, or do you work primarily through resellers? How does that? How do you guys work with clients to set up all of these processes and make sure everything's running properly, et cetera?
We do both. I think if you had to pick, I'd say we probably primarily source most of the work out of our services organization, but we also have a partner network as well. And there's some information on the website of who our partners are for implementations and activations.
Okay. If a company has already implemented host analytics for budgeting, what's the process for implementing consolidation? So you have to redesign or redeploy the app, or even more straightforward than that? How does that work?
Basically, you're gonna flip a switch, and you're gonna have access to consolidations. I mean, I'm kidding a little bit, but to a degree, since we're a SaaS-based solution, number one, it really is as easy as just making that area of the software available, to a customer who's already a customer on the core budgeting and planning solution. So that's number one. The other part of that is, and I'm guessing this is what the question is really alluding to, it says, can we reuse any of the data that we have in there? So, I mean, number one, it's a single unified database. So all the data is shared throughout the entire host solution. So I'm bringing in actuals from my budget to actual reporting or my other financial reporting outside of the consolidation process. Let's say that it just wasn't a need, but now we just went and acquired 4 different companies that have 4 different ERP systems, and now it's a need. I'm going to rely on all that. We're going to share that data across all of the areas or the modules within host analytics. So it's really just a matter of determining where are what are the companies that are going to be participating in that consolidation process, kind of setting up what that consolidation process looks like. But everything else we'll be able to rely on.
Okay. Can the platform accommodate both U.S. GAAP as well as IFRS and any other local statutory or legal requirements?
Definitely. So what we talked about before is that our the CPM solution, the Host Analytics CPM solution, corporate performance management solution, it shares all the data. It's a single unified data model. So it stores all that data in a single repository of information. And this is really where your user is going to be able to access all that consistent information related to financial reporting, management reporting. And we can accomplish, and I think I pointed this out just briefly when we showed the segment hierarchy, we can certainly accomplish other reporting needs for tax reporting, for statutory reporting for different countries. IFRS would just fall into that bucket, so we can certainly accommodate that. Okay. And we do that for a number of our customers.
Okay. Can you develop standalone dynamic reports to send to external parties?
I'll draw some inferences from that. I mean, we can, I guess, number one, any of the reports that we can create within Host Analytics can be exported into other formats, Excel, Word, PDF, etc., emailed off to different parties. So, I mean, so dynamic reports really are just a method of creating ad hoc and financial reports within Host Analytics. So you can certainly do that, yes.
Gotcha, great. So you can set up whatever report, essentially it sounds like you can set up whatever reports you want, either one time or many time, and then there's workflow. So if you want to automate sending them out, that can be done.
Yes.
Great. Good. Okay, well, at this point, we have about 1 minute to close up and remain on time. So I'm going to go ahead and wind it down right now. First thing I would like to do is remind folks that there will be a short survey. It's about 60 seconds worth. We greatly appreciate you giving us that extra minute so that we can hear your thoughts and know what to improve the next time we do this. Also tell us what you liked, and we'll try and do more of that. Also, if you'd like to be introduced directly to Rob or Host Analytics, it's easy for you to request that in the survey. Just click the mouse, and we're happy to help you make that happen. Next, Rob, thanks so much for your time and insight this morning. That was great information, and it's always nice to deal with someone who has so much finance and accounting in their background, so you can help translate how this works in the real world. So thanks for joining us this morning.
Thanks, John. Thanks for having me.
You bet, our pleasure. And of course, thanks to Host Analytics. Great to be able to see the platform, hear all about it, and we appreciate working with them and being able to introduce hosts to a number of our Proformative members and users. Speaking of which, thanks everyone for your time and attention this morning. We know how busy everyone is. So taking an hour is not easy. We're happy that you came and joined us today. We hope to see you again online at Proformative.com or at another event in the future. So with that said, we'll go ahead and let everyone go. We hope to see you again soon. Have a great week, everyone. Take care.